In this segment, I'd like to talk about the course content, what we'll be covering as we go through the course. Of course, you already have hopefully downloaded the course syllabus, and in it there are a list of objectives for the course and a description of the textbooks and kind of an outline of the course and that sort of thing. But what I'd like to do now is I really want to talk about you and why you are here taking this course, and perhaps what might be some of your career goals. Oftentimes when I talk to young people, their career goals are fairly simple. They want to study business, which all of you are doing. Then they want to create enormous wealth. And in this course, we'll be studying operations, which is where the wealth is actually being created. Might be distributed by some of the other departments, but that's where the wealth is created. And so they're going to create some of that wealth not only for themselves, but then they're going to change their careers and perhaps become philanthropers. What do you do when you got $1 billion? I guess you can start with. It's an old tradition. We start with Andrew Carnegie, who founded a bunch of railroads and steel mills and so on, and he built. I don't know if you know this. He built over 2,000 libraries in English-speaking countries all over the world. Made them free libraries. Prior to that, and even today in many countries, people don't have access to libraries. Henry Ford, Bill and Melinda Gates. Even Larry Page, who's one of the founders of Google. I see in the papers now, he's starting to talk about what can he do with all of his money. Now, what can he do now that he's becoming, has more money than he can possibly think of what to do with? Well, where will you work? I suspect that most of you will, for at least for a while, be working as managers in fairly traditional manufacturing companies or the operations department of a whole bunch of different kinds of companies as you move up through your career. A lucky few of you will happen to work for a less traditional company, and that's companies that will generally go referred to as lean manufacturers or lean companies. That's the buzzword today. I don't like to use those buzzwords because in another 10 years that'll probably change and they'll be called something else. But they're the more progressive companies that have learned a lot of what we learned in the last half of the previous century and are able to apply that. You're lucky if you get to work for one of those, because we'll also cover, besides the traditional, we'll be covering that sort of material. Another few of you might end up being entrepreneurs. That means you'll be founding your own companies. And I hope to contrast the two approaches, the traditional and the more modern approach, so that you can think of, as you build up your own company, which kind of a company you would like to have, or which company you would like to see. Early on in your textbook, it talks a lot about the decisions that operations managers have to make in a whole bunch of areas associated with product and quality and location and layout and supply chain and scheduling and all that sort of stuff. I don't like to use the word making decisions. I much prefer to use the word uncovering decisions, because once you have all of the data available to you, usually the decision or the appropriate decision or the best decision is fairly obvious. So I want to talk to you about how you make those decisions. And there are 3 criteria that I would hope you'll learn to keep in mind. The first is to strive for a win-win negotiation in any contact with any of the stakeholders you happen to be dealing with, be those customers, suppliers, employees, people in the community. Don't settle for a win-lose opportunity, because ultimately you're going to lose in the long run if that's what you settle for. Continue to negotiate, continue to struggle, continue to think, use your creativity to find a win-win operation. Certainly don't put your employees in competition with each other, that type of thing. The second idea is the strength of continuous improvement. If you continually make changes and think about everything that you do, particularly when you have a problem, can I solve this problem in a manner that makes this process, this activity, a little bit better? That's the appropriate mindset. And finally, a great many people don't have that kind of a mindset or don't have those skills. And so any manager worth their salt today, especially today, should be focused on creating more good managers, should be focused on teaching, demonstrating, coaching in that particular set of skills. Your textbook, this today I happen to have in front of me an older version of it, but this is Operations Management by Herzer and Render. You'll be using the 2014 edition of it, I think. It's a fairly traditional textbook, but towards the end of it, there are a couple of chapters that seem to touch on some of these newer concepts. They're all important kinds of decisions that have to be made. They're important activities, but unfortunately, in traditional companies, a lot of those activities have greater importance because the managers have created their own problems, and then they have to deal with those. Another book I'm going to have you go through is called The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt. It's an interesting book. It was one of the first of the kinds of books that were written as a novel. It's actually a story about a guy who's a plant manager and the problems that he has. But since the setting is within a plant, he learns a lot of ideas. And one of the key things that comes out of that is that once he starts thinking a little bit differently about his operation or about his factory that he's trying to save, actually everything changes. So when you start with a little bit of a shift in attitude, and it's amazing the number of things that change. And also an important part of this course is going to be a project. It's going to be a personal improvement project. Now, why would we want a project? Why would we want one about improving something personal that you do? Well, one of the objectives of the course is for you to learn a little bit about project management, and that is the way or the technique that most operations managers execute or carry out the decisions we talked about a few moments ago. You'll also learn about continuous improvement. That's what this personal improvement project is going to be. The exact same tools and techniques that you'll be using in this project are the ones that are covered in your textbook and that are used by operations managers all over the world on a day-to-day basis. Another reason is you'll actually get some specific benefits from the project in that certain characteristics of yourself will change. And we're all interested in ourselves, and we all like to pay attention to what's going on and things that we have control of and seeing ourselves change. So I'm sure that will help maintain your interest. The project itself will involve a little bit of project planning. It'll involve creating a list of things that you might like to see improved in yourself or mistakes that you'd like to avoid. I will ask you to commit 5 minutes a day, every day for the rest of the course, to merely collect some data. And we'll use that data to establish a baseline. And then as we try different kinds of improvements, we'll see how or whether those changes, those little mini projects, have an impact on them. I'll also be expecting you to keep track of your time, which in any project is one of the most important criteria. So that's kind of enough to get you started.